Live now from Brisbane, just outside State Parliament. Jackie Trudd, thank you for your time. Did you consult widely before making this decision?
Well, good morning to you and your audience this morning. I did hold meetings with representatives from the gas sector, but I think it's important to put into context the history of LNG and LNG exports, particularly in Queensland. This is a sector that has grown considerably over the past 10 years because Labor governments have made significant investments and facilitated the industry. It's now one of our fastest growing exports. It grew at 40% last year, and royalties have been frozen over 10 years, and we think that now is the right time for the industry to give more back to the taxpayer for their resources.
Is it likely to continue to grow at that sort of pace, though, given this additional impost, which came as, I think, a surprise to many in the industry? Certainly Martin Ferguson, your Labor colleague, has been very critical.
Well, I think investment in the sector is largely driven by government policy. And as was noted widely in the media only a number of weeks ago, the Queensland government moved to accelerate exploration and production permits for manufacturing purposes in Queensland, so domestic production and use, and we are seeing large amounts of expressions of interest through that process. So government has got the right policy settings to continue to grow this industry. As I said, it's one of the fastest growing exports for Queensland, and we think now is the time for us to see that industry give a bit more back to the taxpayer.
Who did you consult with? Did you consult with the QRC? Because they seem to be taken by surprise on this morning. There are concerns about sovereign risk, long-term job growth in that sector. So is there any modelling on this, Jackie Trudd?
Well, look, we stand by our track record when it comes to gas, not only gas, but also coal and mineral exports and industry development. Only on Sunday I was in Townsville announcing investments in the Port of Townsville to improve efficiency and export volumes out of that port for rich earth minerals from the Northwest Minerals Province, as well as concessional access to the Mount Isa to Townsville railway line. We've seen more than 7,000 resource sector jobs being created here in Queensland over the past 4 years. That is our track record, and that's what we will continue to do, whether it's in gas, minerals or coal.
Adani faces its final approval, it looks like, tomorrow in terms of environmental clearances. Do you take responsibility for some of the delays in terms of getting this done?
The delays that people keep referring to were primarily based on the fact that there were two outstanding environmental approvals. One for an endangered species that was the responsibility of the state government, and we've had independent experts have a look at Adani's environmental management plan to assess it in contrast to our laws. But also the CSIRO was given the water management plan by the Commonwealth Government for approval and for assessment, and it was the federal government, Scott Morrison's government, and the Environment Minister at the time, Melissa Price, who only gave the Queensland government the CSIRO report and the groundwater management report just before the federal election was called. So we are where we are because both the Commonwealth and the state have asked for Adani's environmental management plans to be assessed according to the best scientists.
Sure, but it does, Jackie Trudd, it does seem...
And we don't back away from that.
Sure, but it does seem a happy convenience that, you know, just a week after Labor at a federal level lost the election, you see a 25% primary vote for Labor in Queensland. You have federal Labor not holding any regional seats in your state. And then the Premier comes out and says that she's sick of all the stalling and hurdles. Surely your government takes some responsibility for that, because the other side of the election, we've seen an expedited process.
What we have seen is the Premier come out and give some very clear timeframes to the community.
Why couldn't you do that before?
Based on the Coordinator General's based on the Coordinator General's conversations with both the environmental regulator and the proponent. That's happened, and those timeframes will be met.
Do you think it will be built? And how many jobs will be provided if so?
Oh, well, Adani is saying that they will proceed once they've got the environmental approvals. And, I mean, you can only take the evidence of the company being put forward. That's what they say. I know that regional Queenslanders will be absolutely dead keen to make sure that all of the commitments made by this company, and every company that seeks to exploit our resources, gets a return for the taxpayer, and make sure that there are long-term secure jobs for Queenslanders in the regions.
Well, Adani's saying up to 15,000 jobs. Do you believe that, and how will you be holding it to account?
And Bridget McKenzie said there would be 100 jobs, and there's a whole range of figures out there. At the end of the day, Adani has got to demonstrate that they are hiring regional workers in long-term, secure, well-paid jobs, because, quite frankly, that's what they promised, and they should fulfil that commitment.
The Labor leader, Anthony Albanese, has sought the expulsion of John Setka. As a senior Labor figure yourself, do you think that's the right move?
I back Anthony's position on this. I think that any comments that seek to diminish the impact of domestic violence in the lives of women and children in this country should be absolutely rejected, and I support Anthony's position on this.
There have been calls within Labor for the party to distance itself from the CFMMEU as a whole. The late Bob Hawke was one of those who added his voice to that. Do you think that John Setka should just be the beginning of this, and there should be some kind of severing of the official ties that Labor does have with the CFMMEU?
Look, I think that is a big leap, quite frankly. I think if Mr Setka has made these comments, which I find offensive, and I know that many Australians would find offensive, then he should be held to account. I don't think that necessarily extends to the whole trade union.
Just finally, we see 3 weeks ago, it feels like a lifetime ago, I've got to say, the federal election, the results in Queensland, they were diabolical for the Labor Party, as I referenced just before, 25% primary vote at a federal level. Did you sit up and take notice of that result, and what lessons have you learned out of that?
Well, I think there are a number of factors at play here in Queensland, but not just in Queensland, in the Hunter Valley, in Tasmania, right across the nation in WA. So let's be clear, these were results that were seen in a number of places right throughout our nation, and there's a message there clearly for the Labor Party at a national level, and there's a message there that we need to understand at a state level. That's why the state budget is responsive to the concerns, the real concerns of Queenslanders right now, in a climate where the national economy is growing at the rate it did during the GFC, where interest rates are at historic lows, and where we see consumption growth and wages growth in the economy stagnate. People are concerned about their economic future, and this budget is all about securing the economic future of Queenslanders, regardless of where they live.
Treasurer Jackie Trad, appreciate that. Thanks.